And what's up, everybody? Welcome in GC Live Monday episode of the show. Wes Mitchell here, Chris Clark, as we get back I would say back in a little bit of a routine. Probably still won't do 5 days a week this week, but also, I think we're going to try to make sure whenever big things happen, we're going to have a show, and plenty going on, plenty in the time since we last had a show has accumulated to the point that we figured we'd come talk about it. So that's what we're going to do today on GC Live, presented by our buddy Clint Hammond of the Mortgage Network, ClintHammond.com. If you're on the video version of the show, you can see Clint's smiling face right there. NMLS number 71597. Email address chammond@mortgagenetwork.com. 803-576-4450. And probably the easiest thing to do, just go to ClintHammond.com and you'll have more information there, how Clint can maybe find you the right mortgage solution, whether you want to refinance your current home or move into a different home. So we appreciate Clint, as always, being our presenting sponsor. Chris, the Mayo Bowl is official as of Sunday evening. South Carolina versus North Carolina. It felt like this is the way it was heading. Certainly as far as South Carolina being in the Duke's Mayo Bowl, and kind of the opponent, North Carolina, I believe, had been mentioned in connection to this game for quite some time now. I will say this, when you and I did GC Live via Twitter Spaces maybe a few weeks ago, because we were having technical difficulties, and the Mayo Bowl happened to just hop in there to listen to the show, I'm going to pretty much just take full credit that GC Live is the reason why the Mayo Bowl selected South Carolina. So we'll just get that out of the way. But so your initial reaction to this matchup, initial reaction to the selection, which it's kind of different these days. The bowl itself doesn't actually get to even select the teams they want. It's actually much more on the conference side of things. But intriguing matchup, interesting matchup. What are your initial thoughts, man?
There are a lot of them, man, and I think the first thing for starters, and just kind of gauging the fan reaction about this, Wes. I think I think people would have probably preferred to go elsewhere, because let's be frank, there's some bad memories from Charlotte in recent memory. You and I have always talked here on GC Live about kind of that beginning of the end of the Muschamp era. And so you go back to the Belt Bowl against Virginia, which is in Charlotte. You follow that up immediately with the 2019 opener in Charlotte at Bank of America Stadium against Mack Brown in his first year at North Carolina. You lose that game. And really what we saw after that, Wes, was this catapult of North Carolina. There were a lot of recruiting battles that ended up ensuing. North Carolina won a lot of those in the 2020 class, and things picked up from them while South Carolina slipped. And so a lot of people see that as this critical hinge point. So I think a lot of fans are thinking about that, right? They're just thinking about that and having a hard time kind of getting past it. I think on a large scale, just kind of broad sense, fans should be happy. This team's in a bowl game. Most fans with reasonable expectations would have come into this year and thought, look, I know the Clemson result was disappointing. I know the Kentucky game is disappointing. There are several disappointments within the season, but this team has made it to a bowl game. And most people thought, and I thought, that if this team made a bowl game, that's a sign of progress. That's something to be celebrated. So it makes sense geographically with it being in Charlotte. And this is an opportunity. I would see it as that, Wes, an opportunity to go out and beat a North Carolina team that's been reeling a little bit, a team that could have some changes coming this offseason, just from some various things that we've heard, and try to recapture some momentum. Because if North Carolina slips a little bit, that would be good for Carolina. So I see it as kind of an opportunity for the Gamecocks.
There are a few things that could happen that would help the Gamecocks more, in my opinion, than North Carolina falling back to earth, which they did on the field this year. But there has been this just recruiting push from UNC ever since Mac Brown arrived. And in my opinion, it has been probably one of the top 5 biggest issues with South Carolina as far as hurdles to clear to get this program back to where it once was. North Carolina under Mac Brown being able to recruit the way they have has been a huge part of that. By the way, shout out to everybody in the chat. Shout out to Ronnie Martin, former Gamecock signee. I believe that's got to be former Gamecock Ronnie Martin, friend of mine on Facebook. Good to see you, Ronnie. Hope you're doing well, buddy. So, Chris, opportunity to be 7-6, which just looks infinitely better than 6-7. It's a winning season. I kind of feel like the fan base has been a little bit more accepting of going back to Charlotte, of playing North Carolina, because it's coming in a season, as you laid out, which South Carolina did not even really had expectations of making a bowl game. I'm sure there are quite a few people, probably good buddies of mine, probably people who listen to the show, Gamecock Center subscribers, whatever, who swore off going to games in Charlotte. I heard that from several friends. I'm never going back to Charlotte. I do feel like for the most part, the fan base has accepted this assignment a little bit better than they probably would have if it was still the Muschamp era, if this game was at the end of a disappointing season. I actually could be wrong. I have a feeling South Carolina fans are going to show up for this game. It's a very easy drive for people in most parts of the state. If you're in Columbia, it's a very easy drive. If you're, up in that Rock Hill area that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and you're a Gamecock fan, very easy drive. There's a lot of Gamecock graduates in sort of the greater Charlotte area that have gotten jobs there. Charlotte, you say what you want about Will Muschamp. When he said Charlotte is an in-state territory for South Carolina, to me, that was spot on. I mean, I think it's an important area for Carolina, but also you just have a lot of Gamecock fans there. So I think it actually will be pretty well attended. I think South Carolina fans will be up to that challenge. Beamer even, I feel like, sort of was trying to persuade fans last night during his press conference to go to the game, mentioning how the fan base is a big part of the Charlotte folks who put this bowl together. Big part of them wanting South Carolina, to be there. So we'll see what it looks like. Will there be more Gamecocks? Will there be more Tar Heels? I put my money on the Gamecocks on that. Big opportunity, though, to go win a game, man. I think when you look at, and I was talking about this on some other shows, when you look at Carolina's recruiting class right now, there's nobody from the state of North Carolina in the current commitment class. Obviously, they'd love to change that with James Pierce, who is one of the final targets still out there in this class. But you think back to the Spurrier rosters, Melvin Ingram, Chris Culliver, Travian Robertson. Moving forward from that, like Corey Robinson, Pharaoh Cooper, there were guys that were sort of longtime starters within this program that were from the state of North Carolina. And in my opinion, South Carolina has to find a way to get that state back if they're going to make progress in the East. You look to your South. Georgia is really pretty much at an all-time high as a program as far as the level in which they're recruiting. Clemson, the last 5 years, has been at an all-time high as a program. If you're Carolina, when I said in the open, Chris, that one of the best things that could happen to South Carolina would be North Carolina coming back to earth, Brent Venables now leaving is one of the things that South Carolina fans have probably been, wishing when they blow out their birthday candles for the last, I don't know how long. So they've had a lot of birthdays where their wish did not come true. So college football is cyclical. A lot of people have been looking at the Clemson run saying, when will it be over? Is there a light at the end of the tunnel for South Carolina as far as maybe Clemson taking a step back? North Carolina has been not good on the field this year. There's some opportunity here that maybe didn't exist the last few years.
When I think you look back at Steve Spurrier's tenure at South Carolina West and those golden years, not to take anything away from those teams, but Clemson wasn't what it is now. They were building towards that. A lot of those teams that South Carolina beat during that 5-year straight run, those Clemson teams, they're really good teams. They just weren't to that elite status, college football playoff contenders once the playoff came around. And even, Georgia still recruited very well each year, and they were normally very good. Florida got to the Urban Meyer level, but early in the Spurrier tenure, they weren't there quite yet. Tennessee had some down years. North Carolina had some down years. So, the point is that this job at South Carolina has gotten more difficult because you look around, the landscape's changed a little. Clemson's elite. Georgia is elite. Florida is in the midst of a coaching change. So, Tennessee isn't going into year 2 of Josh Heupel, and South Carolina lost decisively to them this year. So, Kentucky obviously has, been very successful against South Carolina recently. They've gotten a lot better. Not that they get in head-to-head recruiting battles a lot. The point is that this is a tough proposition. And so it would be infinitely helpful to South Carolina for one or as many of these programs as possible to somehow take a step back. To get some relief. And so, you look, Clemson still recruited extremely well. They got a talented roster still, even with some defections. They do a good job there. But Brent Venables has been key. He's been a critical piece of that. So how do they respond? What hires do they tab? Is it internal? Is it external? And then how does everything work around that? At the minimum, here's what we do have in Clemson. We have instability and some changes on a larger scale than just losing one guy, which hasn't even happened a lot. And that hasn't happened, really. At North Carolina, maybe they're, like you said, I like the phrase you used, coming back down to earth. That's good for South Carolina. Even in the state of Georgia, Wes, even Georgia Tech under Jeff Collins showed a little bit of recruiting oomph, whereas there wasn't any with Paul Johnson because he's recruiting an option. They worked on branding and things of that nature. So you need some of these programs to slip. And I was telling somebody this earlier today via phone. I think there is an opportunity for South Carolina. Not that any of these programs have really slipped per se, but there is some questions. I think there is an in for South Carolina to go in and make a move, to use this offseason to improve and to try to take a step forward, whether it's whatever you want to say. Institutional things, new university president, obviously, at some point soon. They've had to reset that a little bit, but at some point soon, new president. Will there be coaching changes in the offseason? Finishing out recruiting. There are opportunities now, for South Carolina to wedge in there and try to take a step forward in the midst of some of this instability.
Well, and you look at North Carolina, man, on the field, this was maybe supposed, whoever decides what a team is supposed to do. I don't know. I guess it's just a collection of national media people, fans, fans and media set the expectations. This was a top 10 team coming into the year. Now they sit with the exact same record as South Carolina. So at some point when you're kind of selling, you're selling hope, you're selling, come in, be a part. If you're a kid in the state of North Carolina, I'm sure Mac Brown, those guys have been selling, hey, let's all stay home and build something special in UNC. I think they got a little glimpse at, okay, the program isn't quite there yet. So I think that, you look and now does North Carolina find a way to bounce back and have a little bit better year next year? Or is this sort of, I don't want to say the beginning of the end, but it kind of brings them back down to earth already. And for South Carolina, you want to take advantage of an opportunity that is ahead of you. Not that one game ever really truly makes a decision for a recruit, but it certainly makes it a lot easier to talk to these kids when you can point to a victory on the field, a clear win over North Carolina, especially when, we talked about it a few years ago. You go into that game with the expectation that South Carolina, with a veteran quarterback at the time, against a freshman Sam Howell in North Carolina, you go into that game with the expectation South Carolina should win that game. They were favored in that game, and they don't do it. I believe that sort of was the beginning of the momentum on the field that UNC was able to build. I was looking back, Chris. Obviously, South Carolina would love to add James Pierce to this class. They would love to add DeAndre Martin, who is listed as Virginia, but actually is a North Carolina native, to this class. But you go back, man, 2021 class for South Carolina, which was admittedly a very small class anyway, as far as the high school kids. And that's just what we're talking about, high school kids. Off the top, do you remember how many were from North Carolina? Putting you completely on the spot.
A while back, Wes, I'd gone through and tallied this up from, the last several classes. Ooh. One?
Yep, one being Nick Barrett.
Yeah.
Big Nick Barrett, who I believe has a bright future in the program. Also, and I think he's going to be a really good player for South Carolina. So I'm not saying this in any way as a negative towards him, but that was more of an eval pickup, not a go in there, beat North Carolina head-to-head pickup. My point being, when was the last time South Carolina went in and just got a blue chip guy from North Carolina? You go to the year before, let's see, sort by state. South Carolina landed 3 prospects, one being Mitch Jeter, the other being Mike Wyman, who has transferred out, the other being Mo Kaba, who appears, I would say, to be on track to be a future starter at some point at linebacker for South Carolina. So a good pickup there, solid get for South Carolina. You go back to the year before that, Derek Boykins, who has already transferred out, and Jalen Nichols being the only 2 prospects that South Carolina signed in the class of 2019 out of the state of North Carolina. So really, you have to go back, I would say, to 2018 when South Carolina battled and landed Rick Sandage as being the last true big 4-star or higher get from the state of North Carolina. And I think moving forward, that absolutely has to change for South Carolina, because if you get 2 or 3 good players from that state every class, that adds up over 4 to 5 classes. So it doesn't have to be a huge number. It's not like South Carolina's got to sign 10 guys from that state each class, but if you sign a few each class, then that ends up being 12 to 15, 16 players across your roster when you add up the classes.
And I think that is why, North Carolina and even that DMV area, Wes, a lot of people point out that, when you look at Maryland, Virginia, South Carolina is the closest SEC program to high schools in that area. And obviously Shane Beamer has ties there. Some of his other coaches have ties there. You go even further north, Pete Limbo, special teams coordinator, has some ties up there in Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania. We saw South Carolina land a couple guys in this class from Pennsylvania, and Keenan Nelson and Ryan Brubaker, 2 4-stars from that area. I think those areas are going to be critical too. Now, South Carolina still has to take care of in-state. They're going to have to go to Florida and Georgia and some other states and win their fair share. But now look at the landscape, Wes. At Miami, for instance, Mario Cristobal is going to be their new head coach. He's going to land a lot of talent from Miami, right? I think it's fair to say, with his ties down there, he's going to land some in-state talent and keep guys in South Florida home a lot. Billy Napier, we'll see how his tenure at Florida goes. But what we do know about Billy Napier is, with him being schooled from that kind of Nick Saban mold, he's going to put in that recruiting system. And at a minimum, he and his staff are going to work harder and I think work smarter than Dan Mullen's staff did in Florida at recruiting. There are a lot of issues there. I think they'll be more successful generally in terms of especially players in the state. Clemson's going to recruit national. Tennessee they're going to recruit guys in the Southeast. Georgia's going to mine the Southeast and beyond, right? So there's a lot of, there's a ton of talent in the Southeast, but there are also tons of schools that you need to beat recruiting those guys. And you do have to win some of those battles. But when you can go up one state into North Carolina, 2 hours up the road, when you can go 5 hours, 6 hours up the road, and maybe pull some guys who are interested in great opportunities in the SEC, that maybe gives you an advantage. And I think that's why that territory is going to be critical. But no doubt, South Carolina needs more success in the state directly up north. No doubt about it.
All right, let's talk a little recruiting, like current recruiting, Chris, and then we'll circle back. I mean, we've got and we've got several weeks to talk about the actual game and the matchups and all that stuff within the game. So let's talk a little recruiting, maybe talk a little big picture with the other changes in college football, and then we'll sort of close it out. You and I both took in some state championship games over the weekend. Gamecock Central, between the two of us, was represented at all 5 games for all 5 classifications. Congrats to the players and coaches of the schools that took home titles. I was about to say we saw some good games. We saw one great game, and then we saw some great team performances, I would say, across the board. But really, honestly, only one true close, tight game with Gaffney coming from behind to beat Dutch Fork. And let's start right there. Gaffney taking the win. Obviously, as far as prospects go, Antonio Williams, Dutch Fork wide receiver, 4-star kid, the biggest name prospect among any of the 5 games. And South Carolina on hand, clearly to show, how much they want that kid. The fact that Justin Stepp there literally from the moment that Dutch Fork and Williams got off the bus all the way through the entire game. And, I don't know, maybe I'm making too much out of this, Chris. I thought it was kind of interesting that South Carolina as a staff had representation at every single game this week. Even if, some of these games did not really have guys that Carolina's going to be recruiting for the most part. Did you see a Clemson coach all weekend?
No, I didn't. And I'm trying to think back if there may have been one.
Was there somebody there Thursday?
I don't think so. For the South Point game,
yeah,
don't recall seeing anybody. It's possible I missed. But I don't. The presence point is you're trying to make presence not there like South Carolina.
It wasn't even close. Like I don't want to definitively say there was no one from Clemson there if I can't truly accurately say that, but I can accurately say I didn't see. Okay, Scott Hill, good call. Dabo was there Friday
That's right.
to watch his son play. He was in the stands. He was not on the sideline. He was in the stands watching his dad. Good call, y'all. All right, I knew that's why I asked it as a question, not as a statement. But point being, at some point this weekend, just about every single South Carolina assistant at some point this weekend, just about every guy off the top of my head, I remember seeing them. Now, Shane Beamer did not attend the Dutch Fork game strategically because you only get one visit per prospect, and he will, of course, go in home with Antonio Williams this week. But I just thought it was interesting. We saw other in-state coaches, various in-state coaches at various games. Sean Elliott was at the game on Friday night watching KZ Adams play for Gray. And you just would have thought, it seems like in years past at Williams-Brice that I've seen Clemson coaches there. It just sort of was striking to me. But Carolina, in my opinion, Chris, clearly wanted to have a presence at all the games. But then certainly you look at Antonio Williams' game, as I said, Justin Stepp there from moment one until the end. But also off the top of my head, Eric Kimry, associate head coach. We spotted these guys personally: Pete Limbo, Montario Hardesty, Clayton White, Mike Peterson made an appearance. I mean, it was Jimmy Lindsay. I mean, it was a full house there as far as Carolina coaches purposely, watching Antonio Williams.
They did, and I think Shane Beamer, clearly sending a message that they're going to try to prioritize the state. All coaches talk about that, right? I mean, every coach that walks in the door at South Carolina is going to talk about it, but it was kind of a thing where the actions speak louder than words, right? And you're right. I mean, thinking about Justin Stepp at that game. Well, first of all, to back up before the game, awesome moment, man. Eric Kimry, being a Dutch Fork alum, presented. And this is on social media. I saw Chris Deering had it on Twitter, Wes. He presented a jersey, and it was a Gamecock jersey with Jack Al-Khatib, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, who tragically passed away, of course, for Dutch Fork earlier this year. One of their offensive linemen, his mother was in the stands, and they presented her with a custom jersey, which was awesome. Awesome moment before the game. So little things like that, right? Little things like having the coaches with a significant presence all weekend on the sidelines. And then we saw, of course, Justin Stepp. Antonio Williams has taught. He doesn't say much, Wes, but we have kind of harped on one of the quotes that he gave actually to our Auburn Rivals site, auburnsports.com, that being that playing time and relationships were going to be big. And, there are matters that in recruiting that are opinions where I could say, I think this. I don't know that nobody would have any argument that Justin Stepp has been outworked in terms of his pursuit of Antonio Williams. He was there from the beginning, warm-ups to end of the game. Whatever way Dutch Fork was coming towards the end zone, he's standing in the end zone right there waiting. Antonio scored that one touchdown. Justin Stepp is right there waiting. So they have definitely, shown through actions, how much of a priority this kid's been.
Well, and from moment one that Stepp was hired, Antonio quickly became, the target. And from moment one that Eric Kimry was hired, which was actually before Stepp was hired, Antonio had an offer from the Gamecocks right off the bat. So they sort of have been stronger longer here. Some people have wanted to assume that when Clemson offered that meant he was going to be a lock to Clemson. I really, truly, guys, I don't think that is the case at all. Like, Carolina is firmly in the battle down the stretch for Antonio Williams. I thought for the longest that Ole Miss had quietly worked their way into being the favorite. And I still believe that they were. It kind of feels like Ole Miss maybe has faded a bit down the stretch. It feels like South Carolina has held strong. Clemson has maybe, made a bit of a move, obviously, with the offer. But they already burned their in-home visit. I don't really know that the in-home pushed Clemson over the top or anything like that to this point. I think South Carolina is firmly in it. The thing I'm watching, does Antonio Williams take one more visit? Does he pop up in Clemson this week? Right now, he's on the North-South roster. Right now he's scheduled, as far as we all know, to play in that game. Practice starts on Wednesday. Right now, he's also scheduled to host South Carolina's coaches for an in-home visit. Next week is a dead period. There is no visiting, the day before the signing period starts. So there's really a tight window for an actual visit to Clemson. Could it happen? Of course, you can make anything happen if you really want to make it happen. I'll be curious to see, does he play in North-South as expected? And, does this visit take place? So those are the two things that I will be paying most attention to, the big factors this week, other than the obvious, Chris, which is, how does the final in-home with Shane Beamer, go.
Absolutely. And look, a lot of people are bringing up exactly what you said, Clemson jumping in. Here's the reality. If they had jumped in earlier, say this summer, I think things would be even more interesting than they are now. We may be sitting here with Clemson in the lead, Wes, had that happened. It didn't. And it was late. And everybody knows for a guy in Williams and his family who value relationships, they can look at it and know and see, because the proof is in the pudding, that Antonio didn't get an offer until late this season after they had already missed on a target and Andre Green that eventually committed to North Carolina. So they see that, and that does affect things for a kid like Antonio and his family. There are also questions about the offense, right, for South Carolina. Those are things that they have to deal with. That, I would say, has made it more difficult, to where it's not maybe as much of a slam dunk, or however you want to term it, that it could be or that it should be. So those questions are still there, and Clemson's still there. But I think the relationship aspect and how Justin Stepp and Eric Henry and Shane Beamer handle this recruitment have been critical. Now, are they at the finish line? No, they're not. Right. And I think everybody in Columbia on that coaching staff would sleep a lot better if Antonio ends up not taking that visit to Clemson. I think that would be huge, because then you just sustain your momentum up until next Wednesday. I think you feel a lot better about things. But Shane Beamer, saving that in-home strategically, still have a huge presence throughout the weekend. You can go in late and try to, be there at the end, just like they have been there from the beginning.
Yeah, and if we always say recruiting is a marathon, not a sprint, this is like South Carolina is rounding the final curve with the finish line basically on the horizon. They can see the finish line. I feel like Clemson's like right over their shoulder, speeding up behind them. Now you just got to get to that finish line, answer any final questions in the in-home, and land him. And truly a guy who I believe I've seen him. We've seen him play many, many times now. I think he's every bit what he's hyped up to be, every bit of a 4-star player. What did you think watching him on Saturday, man? He's a lot of receivers who are like quick, smooth type players, make you miss type receivers. They enjoy stepping out of bounds when they have an opportunity to just get a first down. This kid actually plays pretty angry. Like he plays physical. I feel like, for a guy who's not a huge player, and he's like very, very polite, sort of low key off the field, but I think kind of plays with a chip on his shoulder on the field.
Yeah, I think he's fast, physical, and smooth. Like those are kind of the characteristics that come to mind. You remarked to me, Wes, during the game that Antonio in that game caught everything that came his way with ease, with the exception of one pass that there's no way that could have gone down as a drop, Wes. That I think it was a 3rd and 20 late in the game. The ball's overthrown, and Antonio would have had to haul in a one-handed, one-armed catch while he was getting hit on that play, and actually went down for a little bit and had to come out for the next play. But that was the only one. They got the ball to him a lot in space, scored a touchdown, after making a move in space. He's a return asset. So he's a guy that can run. And you're right. I was impressed by the level of physicality and the kind of want to that was there. He really played with great effort.
Yeah, career high in catches, by the way, with 12. Somebody asked on there, like Debo. Debo is a running back playing wide receiver, in my opinion. Debo literally maybe could have been an NFL running back. I don't know if the skill sets. Yes, and Debo played angry as well. Antonio, if you want to compare him, like the easy comparison for me, just so Carolina fans would kind of know his style of play. To me, it's more like Shi Smith. If you're going to talk about a somewhat recent Gamecock, not that they're identical by any means, but style of play wise, I would say And remember, Shy was ranked probably right around the same spot as Antonio. Looking back, so are you on board with Shy as a potential comp, Chris?
I remember very early on looking at Antonio's film, and I remember us having that conversation that there was a little Shy Smith there. I think, man, we forget how good of a prospect Shy was. Like some of the stuff that he did at Union County, and then we saw him in camp, and heck, some of the stuff he did at South Carolina, I mean, was outstanding. The guy made tons of plays. There are, to me, some similarities. I think that Shy may have been even a little bit more faster, and maybe even at his size a little bit more physical, and maybe Antonio's a little bit more even smooth, than Shy in some regards. So there are definitely there for me some similarities, and I would agree more Shy than Debo for Antonio Williams.
Yeah, both. So Antonio and Shy in high school, both listed at 6 feet. Shy listed 170. Antonio listed 180. Antonio, the number 37 receiver in the country, according to Rivals. Shy, the number 34 receiver. Both 4 stars in the 5.8 category, which, as we know, Rivals has 5.8, 5.9, and 6.0, which is the 3 different categories of a 4-star. I think, and I thought for Shy at the time, and I think for Antonio now, both a little bit actually underrated as far as where Rivals has them. I would have them a step. I think we commented at the time we would have had Shy a notch higher, I should say. Probably would have Antonio a notch higher as well. Other guys, Jarvis Green for Dutch Fork, man, that kid runs really, really hard. Early offer from Charlotte. That's probably a smart offer for those guys. But I sort of suspect Jarvis Green's going to have some bigger opportunities moving forward in his recruitment.
Yeah, he's one. Jarvis Green did some good things this weekend. Dutch Fork's got a defender, Landon Danley, who was a good player on the other side for Gaffney. In that game, we saw Grayson Loftus at quarterback, and Grayson had a nice performance, man.
Big boy throw on 3rd and 15.
Oh man, so he had the pick early on, right? But he really rebounded, and he did a great job in the pocket. There were several throws. You mentioned that big boy throw on 3rd and 15. He navigated the pocket. He bought some time to make some throws. He even made some runs for Gaffney. And this is a kid that I think with that performance, he's going to raise some eyebrows of some schools. He's already got a nice offer list, Kentucky, Marshall, several others that have jumped in on him, but his stock, may be on the rise after that too. So a good performance. Wes, you got to see Zay McLeod, right, in the 23 class. I was not able to attend that game, but I wanted to get your thoughts on what you saw out of the Camden, defensive tackle from the 23 class.
Yeah, I put him in, Chris and I don't do the rankings, but I always sort of try to think about, okay, where would I slot this guy? Rivals currently has him as a 3-star. I think some other sites maybe currently have him as a 5-star. I would probably split the difference there. I think Zay is a 4-star prospect right now. Still sort of, I believe, coming into his own as far as like down to down, technique and effort and stuff like that, which is something you see pretty often with interior defensive line prospects at the high school level. But man, as far as looking the part, dude has tree trunks for legs, and just really early on was making it look easy as far as defeating some pretty talented looking big Dorman offensive linemen, or Daniel offensive lineman, I should say. So dude, I think A, South Carolina's in good shape. B, there's a lot to work with Zay. And I think I've seen him improve from when I saw him last time. And I think Jimmy Lindsey really has done an excellent job of getting South Carolina in position early. Clemson seems to be holding off, waiting to see what's going to happen there. And South Carolina's had him in. I don't even know what the number would be now. If you went back and counted since he first visited in June, between just regular old visits in the summer, camps in the summer, games, I think he came by for a random Wednesday or something during the season. Like, that kid has been at South Carolina a ton. And I think Jimmy Lindsey's done an outstanding job.
He has. That's another example of a kid that Carolina's gotten in very early on, and it can become hard to beat a team that gets in on the ground floor like that for an in-state kid, whether it's at South Carolina or Georgia, whatever in-state school you want to pick for a guy that's in their backyard. And that's what they've done with McLeod. You're right. I've lost count. I mean, there's been so many visits. We saw him this summer, and you can tell that like there's still a way to go for Zay, but he has progressed and improved and continued to grow as a player. And there's a lot of growing left to do. He's just got a lot of physical traits. I remember this summer, Wes, hearing somebody say after watching him in camp, he doesn't know how good he could be. So this is a kid that just has a lot of physical traits that he can continue to tap into as he develops. So Carolina's done a great job there. It helps that Clemson hasn't pursued as hard. I think if they do jump in, Zay's been on the record saying he'd like to get a Clemson offer. Sure, who wouldn't? But I think that's going to end up helping Carolina's chances if this does progress into even more of a battle than it is right now.
Yeah, I think they're in great shape right now. Chris, before we get any further, you want to tell everybody about Dead Soxy?
Yeah, let's do it, man. Let me pull up my little fancy Dead Soxy graphic here. Check out deadsoxy.com. I saw somebody yesterday got a notification, had somebody purchase some Dead Soxy socks. We get those a lot, so you should join those folks. Go to deadsoxy.com at deadsoxy.com. Use the promo code COCKY, that's COCKY. You can get 25% off your entire order. Check out their college line. Check out their dress socks, their athletics, their no-shows, all sorts of stuff for anyone at deadsoxy.com. Promo code COCKY for 25% off.
All right, y'all. The coaching carousel continues to turn. How about this? How about just the way all of these various openings have taken place, Chris? I mean, you've had, from Lincoln Riley leaving Oklahoma, which didn't it seem like for the longest time you really didn't see that sort of Power 5 to Power 5 moves anymore. It was kind of hard for schools to poach from a fellow major conference program. And this year, we've seen Southern Cal go in and steal from Oklahoma, which who would have ever thought that Oklahoma would have somebody steal a coach from them? You've seen LSU steal from Notre Dame. Now Miami steals from Oregon. But the way this one played out with Miami basically saying, we're going to go hire this guy, but if he says no, we're just going to keep our current guy. I mean, I guess that's happened before. Maybe it's never played out publicly, but this one played out. I mean, that reporting got out. I don't know, man. First of all, what did you think of how it played out? Second of all, what do you think of the Cristobal hire?
So the first thought I had is it was hard to think, that Manny, the way they handled the Manny Diaz situation was like, wow. At first I was like, I've never heard of this. When I thought about it a little bit more, you remember Texas kind of held Tom Herman hostage in that same way. Similar. The reporting came out, hey, Texas is going to go make a run at Urban Meyer. If they don't get Urban Meyer, they're going to bring Herman back. Right. And so then they make the run. They don't end up getting Urban. They end up deciding to offload Herman. Then they go hire Steve Sarkisian. And everybody's kind of like, what are we doing here? That was the closest thing I could think of. Cristobal, obviously, dude, with his ties to Miami, which are substantial, he's a guy that really, really works hard at recruiting. You would think that he's going to do a really good job of keeping guys in state. He's going to build a staff that's really focused and recruiting centric. So I thought that was an interesting hire. Oregon had, I would say all things considered, a little bit of a disappointing season given how they played in some big games. They did beat Ohio State, but then they had some disappointments, got absolutely waxed by Utah basically twice in a row. in the regular season in their conference title game. But I think for Miami, that's probably as good of a hire as you can get. You get a coach that a lot of people have expressed interest in, and you're bringing him home. That hire makes sense. We've seen hires like that. Scott Frost has not worked out so far when it made the most sense. So still hard to tell. Yeah, the other moves, man. I mean, those were earth movers. I mean, Cristobal totally made sense, and you could see it coming. These other ones, maybe you didn't see is coming as much. I mean, Notre Dame, that's a destination job, but Brian Kelly gets a huge contract. Scott Woodward, the LSU AD, is a splash guy and made a splash hire. Lincoln Riley, unique set of circumstances. You can totally get him saying, instead of increasing the competition level I have by going to the SEC, let's roll out to Southern Cal, where I already recruit a lot anyways, and go take on a new challenge. So I thought that was an interesting move, and I thought it was a pretty smart move, frankly, from Lincoln Riley.
What is the best hire between Venables to Oklahoma,
Ooh,
Lincoln Riley to Southern Cal, Brian Kelly to LSU, and now Cristobal to Miami? Best hire. Let's throw in. Well, I was going to say throw in. I think it's actually like, okay, you throw in Marcus Freeman, Notre Dame. I think that's an outstanding hire actually for Notre Dame, but it's kind of hard right now, at least on paper, to compare. It's kind of hard to even put the Venables or Freeman hire in the same place with the other three because those guys have not been head coaches yet. So just based on having the data of seeing the other guys as head coaches, it's really hard to compare, a Venables hire, a Freeman hire. I think those are great fits. The Napier hire, obviously we can throw that one in there. At the same time, that's not even the same as what Miami, Southern Cal, and LSU did, which is go out and poach a true Power 5 sitting successful head coach.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we don't see that happen, and now we've seen it happen 3 times within this still relatively young offseason.
Yeah. I would say out of those three, so like the Power 5, I think Lincoln Riley was the best hire, in my opinion, because I think, Brian Kelly has a, I guess you could say like a similar resume and everything. Like nobody's won a title, right, out of these guys, a national title. But Lincoln has the college football playoff experience. I go back to he already recruits in Southern California a lot. And we've seen guys follow him from Southern California. USC, Southern California needed a jolt of energy. They needed excitement in terms of their offense. They needed a different personality with some edge, and they needed some recruiting excitement. Now, they have all those now. I still think Brian Kelly's a little bit of a weird fit in LSU, man. It wouldn't surprise me if he won. It wouldn't surprise me if he flamed out. Most of his staff is staying in Notre Dame. It's kind of a weird fit. What's his staff look like? Like, I have the most questions about that one.
Yeah, I'm a Brian Kelly hater. I will fully admit that. I'm not a fan, dude. He screams used car salesman to me.
I haven't even won all my games yet. That line from his Southern accent speech.
I had to re-listen to that to see if he really said what I thought he said.
He said it.
First of all, you don't win the games. Your team wins the games.
Right.
You don't win the games. They aren't your wins. And second, from the story that came out about him making grad assistants shovel his front yard instead of letting them come inside for the Christmas party, all the way up to the story about sending the video assistant up into hurricane forced winds or whatever um, that led to ultimately somebody passed away from it. I think I don't know, man. Like I've never been a Brian Kelly fan, so I agree. It is a very odd fit. Now that may be the easiest. You're never going to say it's easy to win in the LSU West in the SEC West at LSU, but you also are at a place where the last 3 hires have won national championships because you don't have another major program in your state to fight off for talent. So you're going to be in a position to win games there. But it is a weird fit. I kind of have to agree. I think Lincoln Riley is probably there are no sure things, but Riley will have such an influx of talent right off the bat. The Pac-12 as a whole is not great. I feel like his offense will instantly be one of the best in that conference. So they'll instantly have a chance to win games. Cristobal, probably just the best fit as far as the hires go, as far as it just making complete sense. Lincoln Riley, I feel like, is one of those guys that would make sense if you hired him anywhere. But if you go and sort of look at what Miami's going to have to deal with in the ACC, not quite as much competition as at these other jobs. So they all kind of make sense, but I would say certainly Lincoln Riley, one of the 3, Cristobal 2, and then Brian Kelly 3.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And dude, look at you look at the Pac-12. The way I've been thinking of it is not to say there's absolutely no competition, but if you're Lincoln Riley walking into that Southern Cal job, who are you when you're walking in and you're surveying that room? You're looking at Oregon, right? Like that's your main competition on the recruiting trail because they recruit in Cali a lot. Cristobal and his staff work really hard, and they're a good program. Other than that, I mean, Washington, not what they were, and that's why they just fired their head coach, Jimmy Lake. UCLA, they've got Chip Kelly. They've gotten better, but they're not great. There's not a lot there in terms of the competition level. And so you can instantly walk in and, like you said, Southern Cal, they have not squeezed out as much production as they should have, even with the talent they've had the last several years, which is why they're making a coaching change. And Clay Helton got plenty of time to do it and didn't get it done. And so I think he'll squeeze more out of the talent. The offense will be an equalizer. He'll give them that jolt of energy and excitement. And I think he'll recruit well, too, because he's already at a previous job in the Midwest recruited that area. And I think it'll be a little bit even easier for him now.
All right, let's talk a bit more before we get out of here, Chris, about the Venables hire at Oklahoma, specifically kind of what we started out with, the direct effect, if any, on South Carolina. How much do you think this helps, just on the field? I mean, let's not downplay what Venables brought to that program. Like he out-schemed a lot of people throughout his time at Clemson. Their defense clearly took it to another level from the moment he got in, started to instill his principles, started to install his scheme, and added players. This is a guy who, I was reading the Clemson boards today. Very few coordinators out there that are as good as he is on the field, but also bring the energy he brings to the recruiting trail. You see guys with one or the other. Very few have both. How much does this hurt Clemson in relation to South Carolina?
I think every Gamecock fan is probably hopeful that the answer is a lot. I tend to think that Brent Venables is going to be very hard to replace. And that's not to say that Clemson still couldn't be a very good or even great program as they've been. Part of me wants to say, well, hey, we got to wait and see what does Dabo do at that coordinator spot. Does he promote from within? Does he bring somebody from the outside? And if so, who are those people or that person? How do they factor in? But I would go back to exactly what you said. Venables is a unique dude in terms of his personality. He is a really good recruiter, and he's obviously a really good developer and schemer. And so that is hard to replace. I mean, he's one of the best. And when one of the best leaves, and it is such a unique situation, he's been so integral in building Clemson to what it is, I think that's going to be hard to replace. So whether it's on field and the style of play and the recruiting ability, I think they're going to have a hard time finding a guy that can bring, a similar pedigree there.
Yeah, and certainly South Carolina, Clemson don't go head to head a ton on the recruiting trail, but we'll see if there are some more just long term sort of effects of this moving forward with South Carolina and Clemson. It'd be interesting to see the real, I guess, other part of this equation. Who does Clemson go get? Do they go internal? Do they try to sort of take the approach they did with the offense when Chad Morris left, which was sort of keep things the same by going internal? Or do they go out, hire a big name, and bring someone in? Then you have the transition from one scheme to another, different terminology. Does Venables take a couple of assistants with him? Is Tony Elliott moving on, to a head coaching job? Does Tony Elliott take an assistant or two with him as well and give them a promotion to a better title? That all those things are being discussed right now on Clemson message boards. So we'll see what happens and how much it affects South Carolina. Also, Chris, we got to throw a shout out to our friends at Primal Gourmet. Any chat you see come up is brought to you on our Primal Gourmet chat line. Go to primalgourmetsc.com. Tuesday has never been one of my favorite days of the week, but now it is, Chris, because that's the day we pick up our meal prep pack from Primal Gourmet. You can get those shipped, or you can go pick them up for free at various spots around the Midlands, and that's what I do. Great opportunity to have gourmet chef-cooked meals, either, like I said, delivered to your house. But the big part is that they're already prepared, and you don't have to put them together yourself. Good stuff, y'all. Appreciate it. Chris, I don't know when we'll be back. It'll be at some point this week, right?
At some point this week. To be determined. We will let the people know. Yeah,
we'll let y'all know. Charles says that's unnecessary Tuesday hate. Yeah, probably. But, I mean, really, what does Tuesday normally bring to the table other than tacos? Not really a whole lot.
Good day.
Hey, appreciate it as always, y'all. Appreciate y'all hanging in with us, joining the chat, listening on the podcast. Hope y'all have a good one, and we'll see you all soon.